Hey everyone, today we're taking a look at the MakeNoise DPO. The DPO is made up of two independent oscillators with additional internal routing that allows for each one to control the other one in different ways and thus go beyond more the typical modulator primary oscillator relationship that most dual oscillators tend to have. Each VCO has its own unique set of functionality, so there's very little redundancy between the two, and lots of creative uses, since one VCO is not always going to be best suited for the same task. VCO-A offers triangle, sawtooth, and sine wave outputs, whereas VCO-B offers sine, square, and a final or the wave-shaped output controlled by the timbre controls here. It has four different operating, VCO-A, that is, have four different operating modes. There's normal, which is no LEDs lit, lock, which is a loose sort of sync when VCOA frequencies are, the manual says, within an integer range, but basically in close proximity. So it's going to just slightly correct any sort of tuning offsets, which is good for FM patches. Next mode is sync, which is a hard sync of VCOA to VCOB. This is going to sound pretty similar to what you'd expect from a hard sync sound. And then finally LFO, which puts VCOA into low frequency mode. VCOA also has a interesting follow circuit, which allows the frequency of VCOA to follow that of VCOB with just a 1 volt per octave signal plugged into the 1 volt per octave input of VCOB. And it's an attenuator, so you can have different degrees of following, or the speed at which it follows. All the way up, it's going to follow pretty quickly, and going down, you get to no following to very, very sort of slow and accurate following. If you patch an external signal in here, this simply becomes an attenuator for that external signal, allowing you to externally control how much follow there is between VCOA and VCOB. VCOA also has its own independent 1 volt per octave input. So if you don't want to use the follow circuit, or you want to have use the two oscillators totally independently, you can control each one from a separate 1 volt per octave signal. And of course, each oscillator has its own exponential and linear FM inputs, each with their own attenuator. VCOB's unique features are an external hard sync or hard lock input. This is hard sync for VCOB. Just using an external signal, you could use the sawtooth from VCOA or another VCO, just like on any oscillator. And the timbre controls for the final output. Shape, you can see here, blends between a sine wave to a spike to a glitched triangle, all having pretty unique sounding harmonic makeups. Angle and fold adjust the shape of the wave folder. Fold is going to fold the waveform over on itself, and angle changes the shape of the folding. Where the VCOA and VCOB all come together are the FM bus and the mod bus. The sine wave waveforms of each VCO are internally multed to the other VCO's linear and exponential inputs, and that amount is controlled by the attenuators of each and by the FM bus. So what you have is, if you were to turn up the attenuators of each VCO, you'd have no modulation, and as you turned up the FM bus index, it would increase the amount of, in this case, VCOA going to VCOB's linear and exponential inputs by these amounts, and in turn, in this case, VCOB's sine wave going to these amounts of the linear and exponential inputs. Now, if you want to do the classic, VCOA modulating VCOB, you simply turn these attenuators down, turn these up. Let's say we just wanted linear FM, and now this controls our FM index. Very cool, because you can get some very complicated cross-modulation things going on. The mod bus is similar, but you don't have cross-modulation. The sine wave of VCOA is internally multed to the index input, or external source input here. You can patch in a different source if you want to, otherwise it's going to be the sine wave from VCOA. It's also multed to the various inputs here: fold, angle, and shape. So the amount that you turn these up and then subsequently turn up the Modbus input will be VCOA modulating these parameters. Really cool. If you ever plug in an external signal, it simply overrides this internal connection. Okay, I think you have a rough idea of how all the controls work. Let's jump right into some patches. Okay, so here we have a basic example of a VCO-A frequency modulating VCO-B. We're listening to the sine wave out here of VCO-B through a QMMG, and I'm controlling the frequency of VCO-B just from a René. Now, as you can see, I've turned up the linear input attenuator for VCO-B. And remember, the sine wave from VCO-A is internally patched to linear and exponential inputs. So with this down, we're not applying any exponential FM, just linear FM. And with the FM bus turned all the way down, obviously you hear no frequency modulation, but listen as I turn the FM bus up. Very simple FM patch, no external cables, really, really handy. So now let's quickly listen to a little cross modulation. I'm going to turn up the linear on VCO-A, which now means VCO-A is going to be frequency modulating VCO-B, which is in turn simultaneously modulating VCO-A. Let's try some exponential FM with it. And the follow circuit's sort of interacting here, so if we turn this down, we can get something. Okay, here's just a slight evolution on that last patch. I've now got a second René patched into the index input with the attenuator all the way up, controlling our FM amount. You can hear that slight shift in timbral change from the sequence. What I'm going to do now is, rather than have us listen to the sine wave, we're going to listen to the final output, or the wave-shaped output from VCO-B. A very interesting behavior of the fold circuit is that when it's all the way down, in fact, up until about maybe just shy of 9 o'clock, it's effectively off. There's a little bit of signal coming out, but it's effectively quiet. So it's really cool because you don't have to use another VCA to silence the DPO. It effectively has its own VCA built in. Very useful with the strike input. If you feed it a gate or a trigger signal, this will basically impulse this extremely quickly. There's a Vactrol in there for a nice little pingy sound. We'll take a look at that more in a moment. But I'm going to turn this up so we can hear. And again, this is all with just the sine wave shape and no angle to the fold. Let's do a tiny bit of folding, play with the angle. This gives a little bit of a pulse width or animated kind of sound. And we'll change the shape. Let's demonstrate some of the mod bus. I'm going to turn the FM bus down. And we're going to actually patch this control signal into the mod bus from the sequencer. Now again, just like the FM bus, you have the sine wave of, in this case, VCO-A is patched to the input here, and the mod bus amount controls how much signal is being sent in addition to these attenuators. So for example, if we want to modulate the angle by VCO-A, simply turn up this attenuator. Don't use an external signal, and then turn up the mod bus. Let's actually put this into LFO mode to make it easier to hear. We can do the same thing with shape. As well as fold. external sequencer control. Still change the pitch of both VCOs via the 1 volt per octave input. So you get some pretty evolving timbral stuff going on. Just a couple cables and just a couple control sources. Okay, let me give you a quick example of the follow circuit working between VCO and VCOB. Right now we're just listening to the final output of VCOB sequencers controlling the 1 volt per octave. And right now we can't hear any of VCOA or any effect of it. I'm going to turn up the FM input so we'll get some linear modulation of VCOB by VCOA. Now you can hear it's the same static frequency of VCOA modulating VCOB, even though the sequencer is changing pitch. You can slow it down a little bit. But listen as we turn up the follow circuit, and VCOA is now going to track the frequency of VCOB. Here's just a little bit. It's doing it slowly, a little slower than the clock to the sequencer. You get this sort of like sick sound, seasick. A little tighter follow. Now it's almost tracking with it. And that's all the way. There's a tiny bit of lag, there's factorials involved there, but adds to the character of the sound. The changes to the follow amount aren't always immediate either, which is kind of cool. You get this very smooth sort of tracking away from frequency B as you turn it down or turn it up. Of course, if the follow isn't snappy enough for you, or you need to maintain different intervals and stuff, you can always patch another signal, another 1 volt per octave signal, same one you're sending to VCOB to VCOA, and you don't even need to worry about the follow circuit. It still actually does some stuff. There's still some cool effects in there, but you have the options of both. Depends how many cables you have. Here's a very quick example of the lock, or the sort of soft, extremely soft sync mode of VCOA. As you can hear, there's some slight off tune between VCOA and VCOB, creating that pulsing. And listen as I enable lock, and you'll hear that get a little corrected. It's not perfect. You know, the fine tune is going to help you here, but it does reduce the beating between the two. Might as well check out sync while we're here. So this is now a hard sync of VCOA to VCOB. Let's listen to VCOA's output. So now we're listening to the output of VCOA, hard synced to VCOB's frequency. Listen to the saw. The sync sound we're all pretty familiar with. If you want to get really crazy, some FM from VCO to VCOB. that's sync. Okay, let's take a quick listen to the strike input. So we're listening to the final, aka wave-shaped output of VCOB. We'll leave it a nice steady pitch and set this to sine wave, 0 angle, and fold circuit's all the way down, so it's acting like a VCA. Can't hear anything. I actually have the QMMG that's following the DPO turned all the way open. And what I'm going to do now is patch a gate signal from the Relay into strike in. Now this could accept a trigger or a gate signal. It's just going to make a quick impulse, like a very short little envelope to the fold input. And this is kind of the same as basically turning this fold knob up and then down again really fast. So all the shape and angle control movements will have an effect on the sound. And of course we can get modulation from VCOA working in here. It's very handy in a smaller system where you may only have 1 or 2 envelopes and they're doing other duties in the patch. All you need is this little gate signal, and you've got your sort of filter envelope, amplitude envelope, all in one. Okay, so now I think you've got a pretty good idea on the various features of the DPO. Let me show you, to wrap this whole video up, one of my favorite things to do with the DPO and why it's become such an integral part of all the patches I've been doing lately. Okay, so what we've got going on here is something I like to call a super voice. Rather than use the DPO's 2 oscillators as one sort of complex voice, we're using all the different, almost all of the different outputs patched to different areas in sort of 4 separate signal paths, all layered together to create one super voice. So just going down the line here, the triangle output is going into a piston Honda using the external input. So we're using the piston Honda like a digital wave shaper. The sine out is going into the algorithm, kind of like another digital wave shaper / distortion. From the algorithm, it goes into a MMF6 Schweimann filter in bandpass mode. So that's voice 1, the piston Honda, voice 2, sine wave through the algorithm through the MMF6. Voice 3 is the square wave out of the VCOB into a Frequensteiner, which is being frequency modulated by the sawtooth out of VCOA. That's voice 3. The final 4th voice is the final output of the DPO. And all of those are being mixed together via the Schweimann VCA 4MX. And what I'm going to do here is just sort of start the clock going. There's some sequencing from the Relay. I have one Relay driving VCOB at the undivided clock rate, and a second Relay driving VCOA at looks like 1/4 of the clock rate. And I'll just let this play us out. that's the DPO. Hope you enjoyed it. Highly recommend picking one up, and see you guys next time.